Welcome back to your video lesson on dividing positive and negative fractions and mixed numbers. Today our learning objective is that you can divide fractions and mixed numbers. Little vocab for you today is that multiplicative inverse, which are also called reciprocals, so those are the same. Those are two numbers with the product of what? Let's think about it first. Looking at this, we see that we have 3/4 times 4/3. Those are called reciprocals. And notice they make 1 because if you multiply across, you get 12 over 12, which is the same as 1. So these are any two numbers who have a product, which means when I multiply them together, they get 1. So those are called multiplicative inverses or reciprocals. A little silly name I like to call them is reflipricals because you can tell they're just flipped around when they're just regular fractions. So we're going to practice that first. So when it says find the multiplicative inverse, it really means what number times this is 1. So if I have -5 2/3, well, first of all, I can't do its reciprocal. I have to first change it to an improper fraction. Because, right, to multiply fractions, I need them in that form. So I have to change it first. So if you remember, you multiply and then add, because you're representing -5, 3 groups of 3. So we have -17 over 3. That is not its reciprocal. Those are equal. So then there's a second step. What number times -7/3? So really, like, what number times that gives me a product of 1? If you think about what you know, we know that if we multiply this by the, right, dividing, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, that is going to cancel and we'd have 1. So essentially, any number times 1 is itself. So the multiplicative inverse or reciprocal of -5 2/3 is -3/17. So remember, this is equal. You have to change it first, then flip it around. So the little tip here is to find the multiplicative inverse or reciprocal of a number. You convert it to a fraction, improper fraction, if you need to, from a mixed number, and then flip it, refliprical. See if you can try, and then pause and come back. So remember, first thing I need to do on this mixed number is change it to an equivalent improper fraction. So here I have -7/3. That's not the answer, that's the equivalent. So I know that -7/3 times -3/7 equals 1 whole. So my reciprocal or multiplicative inverse is -3/7. See if you're ready to try. -5/8. If I multiply that by -8/5, I would get 40 over 40, which is equal to 1. So my multiplicative inverse of -5/8 is -8/5. Now 7. 7 is the same as 7 over 1, 7 divided by 1. So to make this a product of 1, 7 over 1 times 1/7 is 1. So the multiplicative inverse of 7 is 1/7. All of this is needed to help us divide fractions. So let's get to it. Here are some steps, and steps are great if we're just stuck, but we want to make sure it makes sense more importantly. So dividing fractions is a lot like multiplying, except multiplying by the reciprocal. So think about, before we even start, if I have a number and I divide by 2, I think I know 10 divided by 2 is 5. I could also say that as half of, right, half of 10 is 5. So if you notice, we're using the same digit in part of it as a fraction. Notice that 1/2 is the multiplicative inverse or reciprocal of 2. That's also true. Say I wanted to find 1, I wanted to divide 8 by 4, I'd get 2. If I multiply 8 by 1/4, I also get 2. So we could make a conclusion. What could you say about that? All right, so put a 1 under any whole numbers if you're going to have whole numbers to operate with them. And then if you have, it's very similar to multiplication. Change any mixed numbers to improper fractions if you have any. And remember, this is before before you change it to anything else. We want to do this step right away. And then our first fraction we're going to leave alone. Our second thing is we're going to change division to multiplication, our third thing. And then the second fraction is what we're going to flip. This is what we're doing. We are changing this. This is why it's called the multiplicative inverse, because we're changing that division to multiplication. And we're flipping, or inverse, that other number. Then that simplifying is the same as it was in multiplication, where you can cancel or cross-cancel first using common factors. Then you're just going to go to multiplying straight across. Okay, so notice that's really what happened here and here. And then, of course, we'll simplify and change things at the end. So that should be a little review. Again, the only difference is that now we have integers and those negative numbers. So remember, the weird thing is about division, when you divide, the smaller pieces you divide by, the smaller pieces that you break something into, the more you need. Okay? If I'm going to cut a pizza into 8 pieces instead of 4, it's the same whole pizza, but the pieces are smaller when they're cut into 8ths rather than 4ths. So here we're going to follow those steps. I have negative 4/5. I'm going to leave it alone. They're in fraction form already. So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of 6/7, which is 7/6. Multiplication question. I could go straight across, or I can see that 4 and 6 share a factor of 2 because they're both even. So 2 goes into 4 twice. 2 goes into 6 3 times. So then I can multiply across negative 2 times 7 over 5 times 3 for a product, this is kind of quotient, of negative 14/15. It would be good for me to estimate ahead of time, so I should start doing that also. So here I have something about 4 divided by 3. Well, I know 3 goes in there 1 time, so I think it's going to be a little bit more than 1, and I know that it's a positive divided by a negative, so I think my answer is going to be a negative. So just doing some of that forethinking to help you know that you're on the right track. First thing I have to do here is change these to improper fractions. So before, I'm not even going to change it to multiplication yet. I'm going to do one thing at a time. So I'm going to change both of these. So remember, I multiply, because that's 4 is 4 full thirds. So that's 12 plus 2, so that's 14 thirds, divided by a negative. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1, a negative 7 halves. Now they're in fraction form, so I can do, okay, 14 thirds, let's multiply by that reciprocal of 2 7s, flipped it around, and I could cross cancel my 7s here. 7 goes into 7 once, 7 goes into 14 twice. I multiply across negative 4 over 3, but that can simplify. 3 goes into 4, don't forget the negative, 1 time with 1, right, I do that, goes in there 3, with 1 of the 3 left over. My estimate earlier was that it should be a little bit more than 1, so it looks good. So check your progress. Why don't you give these a try and then come back to check? I might not even finish them. I might just write the steps out so you can come back and check. Like press pause, play, pause, play. First step there, I did keep, change, flip. I multiplied by the reciprocal. Now I did both ways. I multiplied straight across on this one, and I cross-canceled, then multiplied across. Either way, I need to simplify both of those. So then I simplify either way, and I have 1 and 1/2. Here I simply did multiply by the reciprocal. Next thing you're going to do is multiply cross or cross-cancel. So I showed both ways, multiplying across or cross-canceling, and then you'll notice these both share a factor of 4, and that's why I could have done it later and simplified for negative 2 7. The last one, hopefully you estimate. I'm trying to fit 12, so cut something that's 1 into 12 pieces. It's probably going to be a little of them because I'm cutting it into 12 doesn't fit into 1. So come back to check. This one's a little different though because you do have to change both numbers. Notice before I switched to change flip, I just rewrote it as fractions, as improper fractions. Then I'm going to go and do keep and change and then flip, multiply by the reciprocal. So make sure that you're ready to multiply cross or cross cancel. 2 goes into 2 once. Ah, no way. There's nothing on the other side that can cross cancel. 3 goes into 3 once. 3 goes into 12 4 times. Now I multiply across -1 over 8. When am I ever going to use this? Literally all the time. If you're cutting anything, you are dividing, okay? So let's start putting things into groups. So let's do that. Let's try this real world example here. We have crafts. I love crafts. Lena's class is making flags for the school's International Day celebration. She needs 1 1/6 feet of paper for the blue portion of the flag. If the class has a 21-foot roll of blue paper, how many flags can she make? So what we know is that we have 21 total, oopsie, and you are trying to split that into 1 1/6 pieces. So how many times can that fit into 21? The nice thing is we have the steps right here to guide you through it. So see if you can follow these while writing. So I want you to write 21 as 21 over 1 and 1/6 as 7/6. So those what you are dividing, those are improper fractions. Then what you'll do is multiply by the multiplicative inverse of this. So what's the multiplicative inverse of 7/6? And then it tells you 6/7. And then because they share a common factor of 7 and that 7 and 21, they have that greatest common factor of 7, then you can simplify your answer. So Lena's class can make how many flags using that 21-foot roll? Try that. Then, of course, check your progress. Here, we have how many 1.5-inch thick boards are in a stack of 36 inches tall. So we're wondering how many times does this fit into here? So that's 36 divided by 1 1/2. Following those same steps up there, can you rewrite them as improper fractions? Can you multiply by the reciprocal? Oopsie. And then can you cross cancel or simplify? And then you will multiply across. And then you'll simplify your answer. You can do it. I want to see your awesome effort. You don't have to be an expert yet, but you do have to try your best.